Hello, everyone, and welcome to eSpeaks, the show where we unpack the biggest ideas shaping enterprise strategy and performance. I'm your host, Corey Knowles, and today we're exploring the AI prescription for a better patient experience. Healthcare organizations everywhere are under pressure to deliver faster, more personalized, and more connected care, all while maintaining trust, compliance, and security. But how can AI actually help them get there? To help us answer that question today, we're joined by John Matthews, industry strategist for healthcare and life sciences at Teradata. John works with some of the world's largest health systems and payers to design analytics strategies that improve outcomes, reduce friction, and scale innovation. John, welcome to eSpeaks.
Thanks very much for having me, Corey. I look forward to the conversation.
Good, me too, me too. So, John, I guess let's start with kind of the big shift. Why is patient experience emerging as the next major competitive differentiator in healthcare?
Yeah, it's an interesting question for those of us who've been in healthcare for a while. I think that it's always been really important, but I think the emergence of it in this framework in the ecosystem in which we talk about it more is because we have AI. We have some technological capability that we didn't have a number of years ago, and so there's great opportunity to improve the space. It's critically important. It can mean the difference between keeping a patient and losing a patient on the competitive side. But I want to say, like, in the biggest picture of all, patients have to participate in their own care. If we're going to maximize outcomes, if we're going to limit cost, right? Health is determined by what happens outside the four walls of the hospital, and then what happens when you're engaging with the hospital or the doctor. So awareness, being informed and knowing how to navigate are critically important. And we serve that through patient experience.
That's awesome. And yeah, it's definitely where it has to begin. When we when we talk about like the AI powered patient experience, what does that really mean? Where are we seeing the most impact today?
There's a couple of areas that I think directly and indirectly impact patient experience. Excuse me. I think when you see patient navigation inside of a hospital system, I think it's a large gap. But we're starting to close it with better, more prescriptive direction, and we're having a better interaction with the patient when we use smart chatbots, when we can route them faster to the right people when they have a question. I like to say healthcare is like no other industry. People don't pick up the phone and call their physician or their insurer because everything's okay and they just want to engage with healthcare, right? There's a particular need. We see things in the hospital system and like digital front doors where we actually have like a more traditional sort of retail approach where you're trying to take a doctor shopper and convert them to an actual patient. And that means patient revenue, but it also means that that patient who has a need is getting connected with somebody who can help them. And so I think areas like navigation and digital front door, those are areas that we're going to see direct involvement with the patient. But there's also all of the back office, right? Traditionally, healthcare systems are systems and smart software developers and people patching things together to make it work well. Now with AI and the advent of language models, generative AI, there's a lot we can do to make that better and faster and in some cases cheaper.
I That's awesome. I agree. I agree. And how do those like patient expectations, what they're expecting when they come, compare to what most healthcare systems are currently able to deliver?
That's an enormous gap, Corey. It's just an enormous gap. I think a lot of us don't understand how complex and sophisticated healthcare is to begin with. And then on top of that, you just there's just an enormous lexicon and awareness gap. It's an asymmetric environment. Most of us don't know how healthcare works as a system. Most of us don't know clinical terminology. We don't know what the doctor's saying. If you've ever taken a look at a pathology report because you had some sort of biopsy, you have no idea what it says. And so this gap is just enormous, and there are ways I think to level it out a little bit. And I think that's where the greatest opportunity exists. But we have a long way to go.
So what are the like biggest risks for organizations that are falling behind and fail to modernize in this area?
So the business risks are competitive, right? Lost patients, lost revenue. Even on the insurance side, right? We in this country we typically tie our insurance carrier to our employer and our benefits manager and the choices that happen there. But in a world where we are trying to attract the best talent, the benefits matter. And so employers are listening to their employees about how they're treated, what their experience is with insurers. So the business risk can be lost members, it can be lost employer groups for payers, it can be lost patients on the hospital side. But in the grand scheme of things, the inability to modernize in this area is going to lead to high cost and worse outcomes. I mean, we're on a trajectory to just continuously spend more and have a less healthy population. That's got to change.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is an interesting approach. Well, let's talk a little bit about the barriers to reaching that better standard of care. Uh, Many healthcare organizations really struggle with fragmented EHR systems, data silos. Why does this continue to be such a persistent problem?
Well, from a technology perspective, the way we designed systems in the past very much locked the data with the EHR system or the proprietary system in the point solution. So you had the data for the EHR. The EHR contained the patient record, but a patient record is just data about a patient. Why does it have to stay and live there? Meanwhile, we've got vendors who have lived a world of privacy and proprietary to control that space. Some of it appropriately, and some of it a natural sort of business defense, if you will. And they don't really want to play ball necessarily with other vendors, their security there. And then on top of it, you've got a market where people leapfrog each other, others fall away. And so you've got a smattering of systems, and that leads to that kind of fragmentation. The other thing is it's really expensive to then get the data out or harmonized across all these different systems. It's just a very large, an operating healthcare system. Watching data flows is like a hairball. And to deconstruct that hairball and to make it make sense and to turn it into something that is modern and enabling modernity is quite expensive. And so I think that's the primary challenge that we see.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do these data challenges, for example, directly affect patient outcomes and operational efficiency?
To me, fragmentation of the data is time loss at a minimum, right? I mean, to make one system give data, another system give data, tie it together, harmonize it, make it make sense, and then get it to a decision maker is time. It's time, it's energy, it all has to be quality checked. That's lost time. And when you're racing against time in some cases, because either it's clinically warranted or you just have a patient in need and the patient's asking, sometimes you're going to make decisions best guess. Now that becomes, that's not the best situation for the best outcome. And it's not the best situation for the patient. So not having these systems in place and not having a fabric that is easily and readily accessible and enabling to modernization, it is really a time and efficiency loss.
Wow. So what role does regulatory uncertainty, especially around AI, play in maybe slowing down transformation?
So I don't think it's ever a good thing when regulation trails technology so far. There's always going to be a time gap, but when it's this far behind, it becomes ambiguous to a point of a real hindrance. Imagine a lot of these systems are setting up governance bodies where they're trying to figure out, what does AI look like for us? How do we really use it? Where does it fit? Where is it dangerous? How do we govern it? And then when you add into those conversations a risk officer, corporate counsel, outside expertise, you start to have personalities that can dominate the conversation based on that ambiguity. They are people who are more risk averse than others. By not setting the standard, we don't know what good looks like. We don't know what the target is. And so it really does, you lose time in debate, but then you might lose the opportunity in the decision because you just didn't know And because you didn't know, you took the most risk-proof way path you could, which is just don't do it. We'll wait for direction from the authorities. And that really slows you down.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll bet it does. Especially in a field like healthcare where you have so many requirements around explainability and all of that. So, how can healthcare leaders balance compliance requirements with the need for speed and to move forward with innovation?
I think there are a couple approaches. First is you absolutely need the governance body, but I think you need to practice the discipline outside the space of risk. So things like digital twins, development environments, simulation environments, those are the places where you can really practice, let's call it the discipline of the technology and putting AI in place and seeing what it looks like and talking with your physicians and your clinicians and your administrators. You can start to figure it out while building the muscle groups that you need to do it in real life, in production. And so some areas I think are going to be relegated to that simulation environment to make sure that you're able to move forward. There are other areas where it's really just about process. You know, healthcare likes to think it's got a lot of proprietary process and every hospital is special and different from something else. It's not really the way it works. Yeah, there's some particularities, but generally speaking, patient care is about a patient seeing a doctor. There are notes, there's a medical record, there's a billing process. All of this is open to reinterpretation with AI to make it faster. Our goal should be to have our administrators, our caregivers working at the highest level of their capability or the highest level of their degree. And to do that, we need to offload the burdensome side, the manual data wrangling side, insert name of process that really can be agentic here, and we'll go faster. And we'll build trust that way as well.
That makes sense. And it's definitely the smart approach to hit the things that are more adjacent to patient care than actual issues where that explainability comes into play so much. Let's talk a little bit about infrastructure. You mentioned the importance of governed and scalable AI infrastructure. What does that look like in a healthcare context?
Yeah, so to me, and it's probably not unique to a healthcare context, is the data is prime. The way the world is going, it's an information age. It is now an AI age, and all of that requires data. And so we've got to get away from a perspective of coded application to act and sort of think about when that happens, data is created. How do we govern that data? How do we harmonize that data with all the other data? And where does it sit, right? So the separation of data from its specific purpose by actor or system or user, I think is really important, right? And it carries through a consistent theme with like cloud separating compute from storage, right? Let's separate data from data operations to make it available for any operation. And I think that's the first key in setting this up. And then the rest is, I think, more traditional technology, computing and infrastructure and systems and people and discipline and governance. But I think it's the data first approach that we really have to use in this era.
That sounds sensible, and it's very much a common theme we hear in other industries as well, is that you've got to get your data house in order,
Got it.
or you're going to have real troubles. How does cloud-based analytics architecture help unify systems without forcing a provider to rip and replace all of their existing tech?
Yeah, I think of cloud in a modular sense, right? Because we have separated the decision making of what application or thing we need to do from whether we need to order a server and how much memory it needs to have on it and how we rack it. Moving the data center was a big thing. But if you follow that line of thinking, what we have right now really is kind of a plug and play environment. And that's what healthcare needs, right? We're in a period of rapid innovation. And so in a cloud space where they can quickly spin up whatever infrastructure you may need in computing power for the intellectual property, for the third party actor, for even their native new release of XYZ function. That is so much faster, and so much friendlier to more antiquated environments that, we can't go through a big bang conversion on. We don't have the time. We don't have the money. And the old joke about, war fighting and the Pentagon in the United States is we're always training to fight the last war, right? When you do a big bang approach, you take 2-3 years to do a major migration and conversion, and 3 years later, you're ready to go on the problem from 3 years ago. Yeah. Awesome. Well done, right? It's got to be incremental. It's got to be. Because you have to course correct along the way.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's very much it needs to be an ongoing all the time thing. Not we're going to do this and then we'll start X when we're finished.
And where do we got to go next? Because something took a higher priority today, or the market has shifted, or we had an epidemic and a pandemic, and what do we need to do then? So I think cloud allows for that flexibility and those course corrections and that incrementalism that I think is so important to progress.
Yeah, I agree. Would you mind sharing how Teradata and AWS are helping healthcare organizations to build flexible, compliant data ecosystems that actually work in practice?
Yeah, sure. I think, I've spent some time talking about data is prime. And when I think about Teradata, that's what I think about. I think about our mastery of data and all the different ways in which you need to do something with it to make it available to exploit it appropriately for the benefit of your customers or your patients or your members, however you want to. And when you introduce that sort of specialty with cloud, and cloud to me is a euphemism for execution, as we've just talked about, speed of execution. And so when I can take the best of what we have to offer in our deep industry knowledge of data and data modeling, our foundational tools around analytic models and model management, our ability to take third-party analytic IP and push it down into our computational, massively parallelized system for speed, that is what Teradata is bringing to the party. And when you think about all the things that AWS brings to the party, I mean, NLP, Comprehend Medical, Bedrock, SageMaker, right? All of these points of integration that Teradata has worked hard to make available with AWS, I think you've got a very, very powerful prescription. And we see that in a number of customers that we work with. And I think if you ask them about the speed with which they can address challenges once they've done that, they'll tell you it is much better for them. It is much more flexible for them. And when they fail quickly and can move on to the next thing and rip and replace a small piece of the puzzle instead of the entire environment. And those are good things.
Definitely. Definitely. Do you have any real world examples of how this approach is improving patient experience, whether that's through predictive care, faster diagnostics, even better engagement, maybe?
Yeah. So I think the most direct, I alluded to this earlier with sort of digital front door, but being able to convert doctor shoppers and patients and looking and seeing kind of what they're looking at is a diagnostic tool in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And the speed with which you can get that to a disease manager or a navigation expert to get you to the right point, or an appointing person who can think about priority is pretty critical. And we've seen that. We've seen that in places where we have an unknown patient and we can figure out how to get them in the door quickly. And we've seen that with a known patient who's searching up oncologists. I want to know if somebody in my care is searching up, cancer care. Yeah, that's a pretty important tell. That's worth an outreach.
Yeah.
So that's where we see the power of AI and analytics and chatbots and the information being available to just speed the process along and get people to the care that they need to get to. And that doesn't even touch on other areas of the ecosystem where we see what image processing can do in X-rays or lung nodules to more quickly identify real clinical problems. That's an area where human in the loop always, but the pixel color gradation difference that's mathematically recorded in an image is much easier for a computer to detect than it is for the human eye, right? So we're going to see a lot more of that more discrete stuff happening. And we're going to see it in imaging. I think we're going to see it in pathology, in slides. We're going to see it we're going to continue to see it in drug development. Like there's a lot of stuff where either we are directly impacting things, or even if you just take Teradata as a facilitator of research recall.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data just around research. Call it the metadata. What were the parameters? What was the study? What happened? Well, it was for purpose A, but now we've got it inside of a system with maybe an unsupervised learning algorithm or an agent who's looking for other opportunities to reuse that information or that compound or that study for another purpose. We're just exposing a whole lot more capability more quickly in that respect.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, let's dive into kind of the path forward a little bit and look ahead. Where do you see the most exciting opportunities for AI to elevate patient care beyond here?
So I think the realist in me says right now it's going to be process, and that's appropriate. That is absolutely appropriate. This is still, in the grand scheme of the world, this is still relatively new.
Yeah.
But process and reshaping, I think, how the system learns to leverage AI is going to be the most critical and the most impactful over the next 3 to 5 years. Right? We're gonna go through some ups and downs, but that's where we're going to see major shifts in just the operational efficiency. And I think for a number of physicians, if we do it right, we'll see less burnout.
That's amazing.
We'll see less administrative burden on them. I mean, we already see it with ambient listening agents and scribes for patient engagement, feeding AI driven summaries and synopsis afterward. I think we're going to see a lot of process improvement. It just makes things faster. How many times have you been to the physician's office and you have to fill out the exact same piece of information?
And you think you know my history?
Don't you know this by now? And part of that is a safety protocol because of a lack of trust potentially in systems, or because a mistake has happened or we've had an adverse event. But I think we're going to see a number of those things practically improve. The hopeful person, the dreamer in me, wants to see AI really change that information asymmetry. I want patients, members, I want them to be a little bit closer to understanding how the system works, and the system a little closer to patients, so that it really thinks of humans as an N of one. It's a deeply personal thing, healthcare. We need to treat it as such. We need all the statistics and the data on populations, but everybody is a person. And the closer we can get those two parties in terms of a shared knowledge, the much more efficient and much more effective our healthcare is going to be.
I agree, and it's really an exciting field for AI to touch. What steps do you think healthcare organizations should take right now to prepare their data for scalable AI adoption?
Man, the maturity is so varied. I think this is going to sound so rudimentary, but there are a lot of systems that don't know where their data is.
Yeah.
It's just between mergers and acquisitions and just time and this system and that system, and it's written on the mainframe or COBOL. We don't have anybody to fix that. Let's just leave it. It's working. Or there's just so much out there. I think the prescription I write is you got to know where all your data is first, and you got to have an adult conversation after you discover where it is about what needs to change, because you don't know, you're going to find out things you don't know, and then stuff needs to change, and that's an adult conversation about how you move the system forward. So inventory first, and then again, that design principle over the data is prime. We want to build a system that consumes the data we create for the benefit of our patients, our members, and our employees. So I think it begins there, and then obviously governance is critical. Part of the adult conversation is what the governance committee decides. So I think that's where I begin. Is as unsexy as it may be,
Yeah.
that's where we are. We don't know where all the bodies are buried, and we got to go find them.
That's right. And it's a big problem across all industries right now.
Absolutely.
The truth of the matter. It's very interesting. And it's very much where, it's the base of your Lego tower.
Absolutely.
If you don't have that, you're going to have problems all the way up.
Once you get that in place, I think the rest becomes, you see the light at the end of the tunnel. Right? Amazon can help you build a data fabric. Teradata and Amazon can help you get all of that under control. We can help do all of the APIs into the various AI systems or the algorithms or third-party IP. Like, that's the fun part. It's the plumbing and the infrastructure around that plumbing and the control mechanisms for it first. And then after that, it's you're into the fun part, within good guidance of regulations and safety, right?
How do you think health systems can build internal trust and literacy around AI so clinicians feel more empowered and less replaced?
Yeah, I think it begins with leadership by example. This is a very traditional approach. You've got to find your stakeholders in your system who are open. They are believers in potential, or are correctly skeptical, but evidence-based and can change their mind, and so they'll participate in trying this out. I think about an academic medical center where I've got an attending physician on rounds with 9 students, and going, patient to patient, bed to bed, having the discussion about the patient, quizzing the students and whatnot. I think of a 10th student, which is a computer on a trolley. In this case, it could just be an iPad, right? Talking to the cloud. But I think all of that knowledge is available to AI. Why don't we ask the iPad and the 10th student to weigh in as well and see what they come up with? Now, is that going to be better than the other 9 minds plus the attending? Probably not. But I would argue that there are a lot of odd disease presentations, and there's a lot of multi-year misdiagnosis, right? It's not like a system rampant problem, but there's enough of it. And the knowledge base that AI accesses and how it reasons against all of that information offers, I think, alternative opinions that need to be considered. And if you've got an open-minded attending and you begin in that way with students, you start to build a culture that's more accepting of what it could do. Doesn't mean that it always will do something for you, but it could do those things. And so I think you got to find those open minds, and I think you got to put it into situations where it could be potentially helpful. And diagnosing something rare and often misdiagnosed, that's an opportunity.
It is. And I love the approach of looking at it as an additional mind. I think that's very important. And the only winner there is well, everybody's the winner. The patient, the healthcare system, the doctor. I mean, accuracy is always better for everyone involved on the healthcare scope, I would say.
And the challenge of thinking it through from another perspective, right? We all make each other better. It's diversity of opinion as well.
That's right. So if you had to summarize your AI prescription, let's say, for healthcare leaders, what would the key ingredients be?
Get started. One, you have to get started. This is where we're going. Hop on the train. Get your data house in order. and be prepared for those critical, adult decisions about what you're going to have to do and what you're going to have to remediate.
Yep.
And then get your governance systems set up appropriately. Some of that is technology watching and is much more on the security side. But the governance part of what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, where it's going to make a difference is really pretty critical. And you're going to have to do it from a business lens as well, because some of these are pretty big checks, and nobody's just funded infinitely, right? And so there are hard decisions to make about where we go. And I think with those apparatus in place and functioning, then I think you're ready to go, right? And then you can call, insert name of helping entity here, whether it's Teradata and AWS. We'd love it for it to be us, but I think these are the things you have to do to get going. That's how I would look at it.
I agree, and I think that's a smart approach. Well, that brings us to the end for today, everyone. A huge thanks to John Matthews for joining us and breaking down how AI and modern data strategies are transforming patient experience from the inside out. John, before we wrap up, where can our listeners go to learn more or explore the use cases you mentioned?
You can certainly go to Teradata's website, where we've got numerous testimonials and customer use cases in place, and I look forward to anybody who wants to reach out to me or my colleagues. We're widely available on the internet.
Excellent. We'll have a link to that in the description right below this video. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, like, and share this episode with a colleague working on healthcare transformation right now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on eSpeaks.